What if I told you that almost everything you believe about protecting your money during an economic crisis is wrong? Not slightly wrong, fundamentally, dangerously wrong. The assets that most investors run to when things get scary, the ones financial advisors have recommended for decades, the ones that worked beautifully during previous downturns, many of them transform into traps the moment a very specific type of economic environment takes hold. And right now in March 2026, the signals pointing toward exactly that environment are getting harder and harder to ignore. We are talking about stagflation, and if you watched our previous video, you already understand what it is and why it is so uniquely destructive. But today we are going deeper, because understanding stagflation as an economic concept is one thing. Understanding what it actually does to your portfolio, to your savings, to every defensive position you thought was protecting you, that is an entirely different conversation. And by the end of this video, you are going to see why the list of assets that genuinely work as safe havens during stagflation is dramatically shorter than most people realize. There might only be one that truly holds up. Let us get into it. Before we talk about specific assets, we need to understand why stagflation is so uniquely destructive to conventional investment logic. Most investors operate with a fairly simple mental model. When the economy is growing, you hold risk assets, stocks, real estate, commodities. You ride the wave of expansion. When the economy slows down and recession hits, you rotate into defensive assets, bonds, cash, stable dividend payers. You hunker down and wait for the recovery. This model works reasonably well in a world where economic downturns come with falling prices. In a deflationary recession, bonds go up in value because interest rates drop. Cash holds its purchasing power because prices are falling. Traditional safe havens do exactly what they are supposed to do. But stagflation flips the entire script. Stagflation gives you the economic slowdown, but keeps inflation running hot at the same time. Growth is weak or negative, unemployment is rising, corporate profits are under pressure, and yet prices keep climbing, purchasing power keeps eroding. The traditional safe havens that were designed to protect against deflationary downturns suddenly find themselves completely out of their depth. This is not a theoretical problem. This is exactly what happened during the 1970s, and it completely blindsided an entire generation of investors who followed conventional wisdom right into significant losses. Now here's what makes the current environment particularly alarming. We are not just facing the possibility of stagflation in isolation. We are potentially entering a stagflationary period while simultaneously carrying the weight of record global debt levels. Over a decade of unprecedented monetary expansion, rising geopolitical tensions, and early signs of fragmentation in the global monetary system itself. Each of those factors independently would be concerning. Together, they create conditions that could make this stagflationary episode significantly more severe than anything previous generations experienced. With that context established, let us go through the major asset classes one by one and ask the honest question: does this actually protect you when stagflation hits? Let us start with government bonds, because for most people, bonds represent the gold standard of safety. When markets get turbulent, when uncertainty spikes, the instinct is to move into treasuries or other government debt. And in normal recessionary environments, that instinct has historically been rewarded. And when economies slow down and central banks cut interest rates, existing bonds with higher yields become more valuable. Prices go up, bondholders benefit. But in a stagflationary environment, this mechanism completely breaks down. Here's the problem. Stagflation does not give central banks the luxury of simply cutting rates and stimulating growth. They face a brutal dilemma and cut rates to support the economy, and inflation accelerates further. Raise rates to fight inflation, and you crush an already struggling economy. There is no clean solution. And in that environment, bonds face pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Think about what high inflation actually does to a bond. If you are holding a 10-year treasury paying 4% interest and inflation is running at 6 or 7%, you are losing purchasing power every single year while being locked into that position. The nominal return looks fine on paper. The real return is deeply negative. And then layer on top of that the current fiscal situation in the United States, where public debt has surged past $38.5 trillion and continues climbing with no serious political will to address it. At some point, markets have to grapple with the question of whether this debt trajectory is sustainable. If confidence in long-term fiscal stability begins to erode, the consequence is not just poor bond performance. It is potentially a serious dislocation in the market for government debt itself. Bonds might still work as a very short-term defensive play during specific moments of crisis, but as a reliable safe haven during a prolonged stagflationary period, they are fundamentally compromised. The traditional logic simply does not hold. Next on the list is real estate. And this one tends to get pushback because real estate has this reputation as the ultimate inflation hedge. Tangible asset, limited supply. Rents go up with inflation. Property values preserve purchasing power. There is truth in all of that during normal inflationary environments. When the economy is growing and inflation is moderate, real estate tends to do well. But during a genuine stagflationary crisis with deteriorating economic conditions, real estate reveals a critical vulnerability that most people underestimate: illiquidity. If you own a stock and something goes wrong, you can sell it in seconds. If you own a bond and conditions shift, you can exit your position in minutes. If you own real estate and you need to raise capital quickly, or you see conditions deteriorating and want to exit, you are looking at a process measured in months, not minutes. And in a stressed market, you may face significant price discounts just to find a buyer. That illiquidity premium that real estate typically earns can become a serious liability exactly when you need flexibility most. The current situation makes this even more complicated. Housing prices in many markets remain historically elevated relative to incomes and rents. Rising interest rates have already put significant pressure on affordability, and the commercial real estate sector is dealing with structural challenges that go beyond just the interest rate environment. Office vacancy rates remain problematic in major markets. Large volumes of commercial real estate loans are coming up for refinancing in conditions far less favorable than when they were originally originated. In a systemic financial stress scenario, real estate is not your quick escape hatch. It might preserve value over a very long time horizon, but as a defensive asset during an acute stagflationary crisis, its illiquidity makes it far less useful than most people imagine. What about commodities? This is where it gets interesting because commodities have a genuine claim to inflation protection in theory. After all, commodities are real physical things: oil, copper, agricultural products. When prices go up across the economy, commodity prices tend to go up too. They sit at the foundation of the price structure. And there have been specific periods, particularly commodity-driven inflation like we saw after supply chain disruptions, where being in commodities made a lot of sense. But here's the critical issue that most investors miss when they think about commodities as a stagflation hedge. Commodities are not just inflation assets. They are also economic activity assets. Demand for copper depends on construction and manufacturing activity. Demand for oil depends on industrial output and transportation. Demand for industrial metals depends on global economic growth. When economic contraction hits, and remember stagflation includes economic contraction, demand for industrial commodities drops, sometimes sharply and quickly. History shows us that at the beginning of economic crises, many commodity prices fall significantly even in inflationary environments, precisely because demand destruction outpaces supply constraints in the short term. So commodities can perform well during the inflationary shock phase of a stagflationary episode, but when economic slowdown deepens and demand collapses, they can give back those gains rapidly. Commodities are complicated, cyclical, and vulnerable to demand shocks in ways that make them an unreliable single source of protection during stagflation. Now let us talk about cash. And I know what you might be thinking. Cash is not really an investment. It is just a place to park money while you figure out what to do. But a huge number of investors, both retail and institutional, treat holding cash as an active defensive strategy during periods of uncertainty. And there is something to that logic. Cash is liquid. Cash does not lose value in nominal terms. Cash gives you optionality. Those are real advantages. But during stagflation, cash faces a slow motion attack on its purchasing power that is easy to underestimate because it happens gradually rather than dramatically. If inflation is running at 6 or 7% annually and your cash is sitting in an account earning 2%, you are losing 4 or 5% of your real purchasing power every single year, not in a dramatic market crash that would show up clearly in your portfolio statements. In a quiet, steady erosion that compounds over time. And the current monetary environment raises deeper questions about cash beyond just the immediate inflation math. Over a decade of extraordinary monetary expansion globally has meaningfully expanded money supplies across major economies. Geopolitical tensions are creating new arrangements that challenge the dominance of the US dollar in international trade and reserves. Some countries are actively seeking to reduce their dependence on dollar-denominated systems. These are not overnight shifts, but they are directional signals worth taking seriously. Cash is not worthless. Having liquidity is always valuable, but treating cash as your primary safe haven during a prolonged stagflationary period means accepting a guaranteed slow decline in purchasing power as your defensive strategy. Let us talk about silver, because silver often gets mentioned alongside gold as a precious metals hedge, and people assume they behave similarly. In some ways they do. Silver has monetary history. Silver moves with gold in many market environments. When gold goes up, silver often goes up too, sometimes by even more. But silver has a structural characteristic that makes it fundamentally different from gold as a safe haven asset. Silver is simultaneously a monetary metal and an industrial metal. Roughly half of global silver demand comes from industrial applications: electronics, solar panels, medical devices, photography, various manufacturing processes. That dual nature is precisely the problem during stagflation. When economic contraction hits and industrial activity slows, industrial demand for silver drops sharply. This industrial demand destruction can overwhelm the monetary safe haven, demand for silver, pushing prices down even as gold holds steady or rises. This is exactly what we have seen historically at the onset of financial crises. Silver tends to decline more sharply than gold in the initial stress phase. And because industrial demand remains weak during the economic contraction phase of stagflation, silver takes longer to recover. It eventually tends to follow gold higher when the monetary dynamics dominate. But the path there is rockier, more volatile, and more vulnerable to economic conditions. For investors specifically trying to protect capital during the acute phase of a stagflationary crisis, silver's industrial exposure is a liability. And that brings us to gold. Let me be direct about something before we go further. Gold is not a perfect asset. It does not pay dividends. It does not generate income. It can be volatile, sometimes significantly so. Anyone telling you gold is a risk-free investment is either uninformed or trying to sell you something. But when you strip away the noise and look at the historical record across multiple periods of financial stress, monetary instability, and currency crises, what you find is that gold has a consistent pattern of behavior that is uniquely valuable, precisely when other safe havens are failing. Gold occupies a singular position in financial history. It has functioned as a store of value across thousands of years, across dozens of different monetary systems, across empires and currencies that have risen and fallen. That is not nostalgia or superstition. That is a track record that no other asset class can even approach. And what makes gold particularly relevant during stagflation specifically is what it does not depend on. It does not depend on corporate profitability, so economic contraction does not undermine it the way it undermines equities. It does not depend on government solvency, so fiscal deterioration and mounting debt do not erode its value the way they threaten bonds. It does not depend on industrial demand, so economic slowdown does not crush it the way it can crush commodities and silver. Gold's value proposition is simpler and more fundamental. It is a finite physical asset that cannot be printed, diluted, or inflated away. And in a world where governments are running massive deficits and central banks have expanded their balance sheets dramatically, that characteristic becomes increasingly rare. Now let us be honest about gold's behavior during the initial phase of financial crises, because this is where people get confused and sometimes spooked. Gold is not immune to short-term volatility when markets are under acute stress. In fact, history shows a fairly consistent pattern where gold can experience meaningful declines in the very first stage of a financial crisis, sometimes 10 to 20% or more. The reason is straightforward. When financial stress hits and markets sell off sharply, investors and institutions that are facing losses in other parts of their portfolios often need to raise cash quickly, and they sell whatever is liquid and has held its value. Gold qualifies perfectly on both counts. It is highly liquid, and it often has unrealized gains. So there is selling pressure on gold in those initial panic phases that has nothing to do with gold's fundamental value. It is just liquidity mechanics. But what makes gold uniquely valuable is what happens next. Once the initial panic subsides and investors begin to assess the situation more carefully, the flow reverses. Capital starts moving toward gold as confidence in other assets, bonds, currencies, banking systems weakens. And historically, gold not only recovers from those initial crisis declines, it tends to recover faster than most other assets and then continues moving higher as the monetary response to the crisis unfolds. Consider what happened in 2008. Gold initially declined along with everything else during the acute liquidity crisis. Then it recovered. And as the Federal Reserve launched unprecedented quantitative easing programs and the true scale of the monetary response became clear, gold entered a multi-year bull market, moving from around $700 per ounce in late 2008 to over $1,900 by 2011. The pattern has repeated across multiple historical episodes. Initial volatility, rapid recovery, sustained appreciation as monetary dynamics take over. Here is another signal worth paying close attention to. Central banks around the world have been accumulating gold reserves at a historically significant pace over the past several years. And central banks are not small retail investors making emotional decisions. They move slowly, strategically, and with access to information and analysis that most market participants do not have. When central banks accelerate their gold accumulation, it represents a collective institutional judgment that gold is a meaningful hedge against something they are concerned about. What are they concerned about? The stability of existing currency systems, geopolitical risk to dollar-denominated reserve assets, the long-term trajectory of monetary policy, the sustainability of sovereign debt burdens, all of the factors, in other words, that make the current stagflationary risk particularly acute. Central bank behavior does not guarantee anything about gold's near-term price movements, but it does provide important context about how sophisticated institutional actors are positioning themselves against exactly the kinds of risks we have been discussing. So let us pull this all together and look at the complete picture. When stagflation takes hold, what actually happens to each major asset class? Government bonds face negative real returns as inflation erodes purchasing power, while fiscal sustainability questions mount. Real estate becomes dangerously illiquid precisely when flexibility is most valuable, compounded by already elevated prices and rising financing costs. Commodities face a two-sided problem: rising prices during inflationary phases, but collapsing demand when economic contraction deepens. Cash provides liquidity and stability in nominal terms, but guarantees a slow, steady loss of purchasing power that compounds painfully over time. Silver gets caught between its monetary appeal and its industrial reality, vulnerable to demand destruction that can overwhelm its safe haven characteristics exactly when you need them most. And gold, despite its short-term volatility during a crisis onset, has a consistent historical track record of functioning as a genuine store of value through extended periods of monetary instability, currency debasement, and systemic financial stress. The list of true safe havens during stagflation turns out to be much shorter than the conventional investment playbook suggests, and we are heading into this environment not from a position of monetary stability, but from a starting point of record debt, expanded money supplies, and a global financial system showing early signs of structural change. The conditions that make gold's characteristics particularly valuable are precisely the conditions that exist right now. Here is the honest bottom line. We are not suggesting you put every dollar into gold and ignore everything else. Portfolio construction always requires nuance, diversification, and personal consideration of your specific situation, time horizon, and risk tolerance. But the core argument of this video is this: when you honestly examine each major asset class through the specific lens of stagflation, when you account for what each one actually does and does not protect against during that particular combination of economic stress and persistent inflation, the number of assets that genuinely hold up shrinks dramatically. Most of what passes for conventional safe haven wisdom is advice designed for deflationary recessions. It breaks down in stagflationary environments, and gold's unique characteristics, its independence from government solvency, its immunity to printing, its lack of industrial demand dependence, its thousands of years of functioning as a store of value, position it as the one asset class that has consistently demonstrated the ability to preserve purchasing power through exactly these kinds of conditions. Now, there is a deeper question lurking beneath everything we have discussed today. We have been talking about what protects capital during stagflation, but every major financial crisis is ultimately a transition, not just a period of stress to survive, but a period of transformation after which something has changed. The 1970s stagflationary period did not just end, it ended with a fundamental restructuring of monetary policy, interest rate regimes, and the global financial order. What comes after this potential stagflationary episode? If governments and central banks respond with the tools they have historically relied on, what does the monetary system look like on the other side? Because protecting capital during the crisis is one objective, but understanding what world you're protecting capital into, that is the deeper strategic question. And that is exactly the question we are going to explore in our next video. We are going to look at what happens after major financial crises reshape the monetary system, what historical precedents tell us about how these transitions unfold, and what thoughtful investors should be considering, not just for surviving the current environment, but for positioning themselves for whatever comes next. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss that one. Because the conversation we started here is only halfway complete. The crisis itself is one chapter. The transformation that follows is the chapter that actually determines long-term outcomes. We will see you in the next video.